for joining us here this afternoon and finishing the conference with us. Obviously, we all saw Shaun the Sheep last night, and everybody took the opportunity to have selfies with him. But you've also brought some other characters.
Yeah.
We probably know most of them, but if there's a stranger amongst them, tell us who they are.
At either end, we've got two pirates, the pirate captain and the pirate with a scarf, to give him his full name, and of course Wallace and Gromit in the middle.
And in case you don't know, these are real puppets. This is what you see on screen.
Yeah.
This is how big they are in reality. So
I noticed
when, you know,
yeah.
it's
But nobody else has brought toys along at all, have they?
No, they haven't. But then they can't compete with this, can they? And also, we've all been filling in our building blocks of EO. And of course, you had to have something different from Aardman Animations. Can you show us what you've put on your card, Peter?
Oh, yeah, very good.
Isn't that brilliant? That needs to be... That's going to be a collector's item, so I think somebody needs to put it under lock and key for the cabinet at the EOA headquarters. Thank you very much for coming and talking to us, because it's a year next week, isn't it, since you began this process. How long, though, David, was it in the planning to become employee-owned? He's got a crib sheet.
I'm glad you asked that question. Actually, I dug this out because I'd forgotten myself some time ago. So I'm not going to go through the whole diary, but it was a Festival of Ideas session in 2011, when David Erdl gave a talk about a book he'd published about David Erdl. Some of you may know him. He had inherited his family's paper mill in Dundee, and it had been in the family for decades and generations, and he realized all these people on the shop floor were working their guts out to make him rich, and he didn't feel that was right. So he looked into the whole thing and eventually took the company into employed ownership. And that was oddly enough, Alistair Sorday was at that same session, and we had a chat about that afterwards. And we were both thinking about what happened at the end of our kind of professional careers. Then there was a bit of a gap, and then I started investigating this more, came to this conference, met Debbie and Ian Haskell at EOA, something like 2014. And then a little bit more thinking, a bit of planning, and then effectively 2 years ago, we engaged Jeremy Gadd to be our consultant. So we spent a year, we gave ourselves 12 months, having done quite a lot of homework, to actually put everything into place. The first thing we did was draw up this big shopping list of stuff, quite a big spreadsheet, which we just start working through. And then we were fortunate to have one of our lawyers as TLT in Bristol, and of course they had the wonderful Ben Watson, so he put all the legal stuff into place. And it was interesting, so it was a year ago, it was actually November the 5th, which I thought was a very auspicious day. I let off a few fireworks. And the legal documentation, which partially because we had quite a lot of subsidiary IP-owning companies, was about that thick. There was a lot of legal stuff. Most of it was, I was going to say trite, but not essential. So, yeah, that 12-month period up until this time last year was kind of all the mechanics of putting it into place, and then we had this wonderful celebration. Now we're 12 months into it.
And to complicate matters further, we didn't have a board when we started on this. We had a senior management group that, heaven knows, acted as a board, but they weren't formally that. So instigating a board and then helping them to rise to the challenge as well added to the complication of the whole thing.
There seems to me that this is a boom period for creative producers, because there are so many platforms these days, so many streaming services that are desperate for content, aren't there? So surely there's security for your employees without employee ownership, isn't there?
Well, I suppose there is. Yes, it is, as you say, it's a very exciting time, excellent time, exciting time, and we are very outward looking, so we're looking into all kinds of other areas. We saw little flashes of it there, video gaming, we're certainly looking at all the streamers out there as possible outlet for our work. So the outlets for our work are so numerous now. How funny to think that when we started, there was about 2. It was extraordinary how few outlets there were. Now there's thousands of outlets, and that's exciting. And yes, that would be the same with or without EO. So that wasn't why we did the EO. Yeah.
How important is it for you to retain a Britishness to Aardman?
Well, people often say your stuff's so British. Well, of course it is. We're born and brought up in Britain, so that's what we're immersed in: cricket matches, Monty Python, all that kind of stuff. And it'd be very hard to do something for us, say, for example, which would be Polish, or indeed North American. We're not of that ilk, so naturally that's what comes out. Now, we do actually have Polish directors, and we've got quite a lot of French people working for us, and they bring their own culture and their own style with them as well. But inherently, yes, these characters... And there's a lovely thing, actually, about British comedy, which is different to America, which is most of our characters, and these are typical examples, is at the bottom of the food chain. They're losers. So going, even Steptoe and Son, working your way up, Rising, Damn, David Brent, they're all losers. And that's what British comedy is very often predicated on. American comedy tends to be more aspirational. They want people to kind of middle class, rising to, they're up the ladder. And there's a fundamental change. But going back to your question of security, so what would be the alternative as Pete and I face our old age? Would have been a trade sale. And it was really only, I think, almost probably the day, or when we announced we were going to do it on this day, and we talked to the troops at work about the whole thing. And this kind of huge cheer went up, and it really struck me, of course, I don't know what our average age is now, it's probably mid-30s, that there is so much insecurity in the world for them and their families, and particularly their youngsters, that this was something that would give them some form of security. And it only really struck me quite late on that was such a big plus, that they were now more in control of their own destiny than any other model of arrangement we could have had. Because we probably would have done a trade sale eventually, and that would have been to one of the bigger players, Endemol or Disney or one of the...
Although we never contemplated it, did we?
We never contemplated it, but the result of that, and we've seen this in the sector. In fact, I was talking to a colleague about this recently, that you then become an asset on somebody else's balance sheet, and you get traded on. And it was interesting talking to this colleague who's a senior executive at Endemol, which is now owned by a big holding company, and they are on the market the whole time. And he said, actually, it's very unsettling at the upper executive level. They try to protect their producers from the fact they don't know quite what their strategy will be because they could change ownership any day. And I thought that's a very peculiar place to be. You are just an asset. All your people just regarded as something to be bought, put on somebody else's balance sheet to up their value. It's
when we told this to the staff, as they then were, before they were the partners, we had a big room, like 350 people, I think, in the room, big room, and I said, with absolute sincerity, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? There's only one reason. It's because we love the company. That's why we're doing it. And they said, this is our baby that we started when we were 17 or something. Baby's grown up, become a sensible adult, a very impressive adult. So what are we going to do? Sell him into slavery? I don't think so. So that was the spirit.
So talk us through the technicalities of it. Which model of employee ownership did you choose in the end, and why?
We went down the trust the John Lewis model, as it's known, and one of the key reasons for that was we have a lot of contracted and freelance partners. We can now call them partners. And we wanted to recognize the value that they bring to the company. So some of them have worked with us on and off for 20 years. That we are not necessarily their only employee, but very often we've had people, and of course most of those people are craft-based grades, and they're linked to projects. So if there's not a project to do, they're not on the books. But they bring huge amount of value to us. So how would you recognize them in an employee-owned structure? So a trust model can do that, because you're not direct owners, but they can have the benefits of indirect ownership through that. The other thing we wanted to do was, can we get those contracted partners the same recognition in terms of a tax-free bonus as our permanent staff? And we have a criteria for bonuses, and it's 3 months or more employment in the last 12-month financial year. And Ben Watson, I'm pleased to say, pushed this through to the HMRC, and they agreed to it. I don't think, to be honest, I don't think the HMRC quite recognised what they had done, because it's quite a big step.
Look round then.
Yeah,
They look round.
They could be.
They'd probably say, shut up about that, because it's going to have a huge impact.
Is there anybody from HMRC in the house?
Because, in our industry in particular, in a lot of the other creative industries, you've got a lot of contractors that you use, freelancers that you want to use. And the film industry in particular, it's entirely based on contracted skills. So if you can get a model which actually recognizes those skills and they can get the benefits of a tax-free bonus, that is a great success. And that also made them feel equal amongst the staff as well. So the whole thing is, because there's definitely a tension. They feel less secure. Their concern is, have I got a job in a few months' time? The permanent staff know they've got a job in a few months' time. The contracted staff, when's the next big project? That's their fundamental concern. So can you help them with that and help them, or help us, or help the company get to a position of greater security and more continuity?
What has the process been like then for everybody concerned? Because what we hear a lot is that even once you grasp the principle of employee ownership, it actually is quite a complicated thing to achieve, and communication is critical.
Well, the practical thing is there were a hell of a lot of meetings for that year beforehand, because as I've mentioned, the board, there was also the reps group. They all had to be brought up to speed. Everyone had to be brought up to speed. So a hell of a lot of meetings and some very, very impressive spreadsheets laying out, largely thanks to Jeremy Gadd, I think, laying out the year ahead. So it was a vast amount of work. And I think there was, in truth, there was tension in the air because it made everyone strangely uncertain, I think. But now it all seems fine now.
So, working out, so we have 10 constituencies. How do you derive that? Well, working out how you might group people. What's a good number in a constituency? Well, it's about 30. So we have a rep and a deputy rep for about every 30 people. So putting all that into place and voting your reps in, so all that takes time. Once you've done that heavy lifting, it's much more plain sailing. And then the meetings start where I'm me as MD, meetings with the rep group. And of course the first meetings are 1,001 issues to be dealt with. Some of them quite big, some of them less so. And of course you start working through those. So now the meetings are quicker. The number of issues are smaller, and they're probably altogether bigger issues, to be honest, which are longer term issues. So out of those meetings, we've set up, I think it's about 7 or 8 task groups. So maternity, paternity issues, we've got a little task group looking at that, gender pay gap, dignity at work group, looking at actually our rate card, can we make more equal, or seemingly more equal, the rates between staff partners and freelance partners in certain grades. How do you get that right? Diversity and inclusion. We have a thing called internal recharges, which is the way in which we recharge. I'm not going to go into detail because we'll get into a massive bun fight. How we recharge equipment and kit and resource back to production. So we're looking at how we deal with that. And we have an environmental group. And we're also looking at how we do our management reviews, our annual management reviews. These aren't, some of these are going to be longer term things. So some of them have almost completed their tasks, and some of them are just starting, and some of them midway through. And some of them will be ongoing. And we have a well-being group as well. And the big thing is looking at communications across the company as well.
Yeah,
it's a big ongoing.
Dave's mentioned the two sorts of workers between the contract and the full-time staff, and there are two studios, there are two buildings, and what our biggest long-term problem is the strange them and us between those two sites. They're about 9 miles apart, which doesn't help, and heaven knows that's what everyone's working on right now. We've been very busy with that, and all the members of the exec board are making great efforts to be much more visible across both sites rather than just one.
How have you tried to reduce the financial strain that this move places on the company?
Oh, in terms of the transaction, because we were thinking about it quite a long way off, we kind of built up a bit of a war chest. And effectively, we were paid out from that. Had we not been going down employment ownership, we either would have distributed those sums or we would have invested in stuff. So one of the things we didn't want to do, because our cash flow does go up and down, particularly, interestingly, this year we're investing a lot in new productions. So how do you go through employment ownership without putting too much stress and strain on the business? or landing it with a very large debt that's going to take years to pay off. And so Kerry Luck, our financial director, kind of very, very cleverly said, actually, if we're going to working towards this in a few years' time, let's build up a little bit of a war chest, which we'll call the value. So that's worked actually quite well. So effectively, we've managed to do it in a benign way, probably quite generously, that we've managed to do it without lumbering the company with any debt to us at all. Well, there's a little bit of debt to us at all, but not a lot.
What will your roles be then in the future? Because we've heard in the past that sometimes founders find it very difficult to let go.
Well, yes, absolutely. I'm not bloody letting go. No.
At least you're honest, Peter.
Well, actually, it's easier for me. Frankly, it's easier for me because I'm a creative director, and that I love the fact that it's a nice woolly term, you know. And so,
You mean you get to do all the fun stuff?
I do all the fun
none of the
swan around.
spreadsheets?
Exactly. That's basically it. But so, or to put it in more positive light, I can be more project focused. And at the moment, it's particularly feature films are my main interest. And we've got that's the good news. The bad news is we've got about 5 or 6 of them stacked up. I mean, God knows it's slow. And so if I was to see those through...
We're used to how slow it is.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. It is slow. But if I was...
It's called stop animation.
Okay, so if I was to see those 5 at the end, that would be probably 15 years. So I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. I tend to... When I get bored or tired, I'll back away.
What about you, though, David? How will it free
So,
you to do the things that you really like to do?
So I've been saying to people, ask me in 6 months' time. So I've literally handed over to Sean, the new MD, after we've had quite an extensive search across the globe. And
Why is everybody laughing that the MD's called Sean? Is that it?
Sean, not Sean Clark, spelled in a different way. Perfectly capable of running the company. So literally 2 weeks ago. In fact, the last week I've been quite busy doing film festivals and stuff like that. But I'd always said that, you know, if you hand over that management end, you can't sort of hang around like a kind of wispy ghost or something standing over their shoulders. I said, from the management point of view, I'm out of it. And I said that quite firmly, quite early on, to say, look, when I'm out of that bit, it has to be that, otherwise I don't. And actually, it was actually, I think, a session that Chris Budd did here a couple of years ago, where he talked about him and his new MD and how he said the very presence of him being in the building changed the behavior of the people that were running the company. And I thought, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in their shadow the whole time. But my background actually is studio floor. I'm a kind of director of photography, editorial stuff. So I may be pulled back in to do more creative stuff and possibly even get back to doing some camera work. Who knows? In the meantime, I'm doing other bits and pieces. So.
Beyond your own company, though, what wider role do you think that is for employee ownership in the British economy, at least, if not overseas, and why?
I think in our sector, I think there's a huge potential for it. It's interesting, you know, meeting a number of architectural companies here and some of the design companies. I think the asset base that we have, we've got a bit of land and a building, and we lease a big shed, and we've got another shed which is ancient. But actually, the actual hardware asset isn't worth a lot. It's all computers, which we know we write off after about a year. So the real value is in the people, isn't it? And that's, in the creative sector, that's what it is. The kit, you can pretty well go down to PC World and buy everything you need to do what we do for about 10 grand. So the price of entry is really very, very low. So what's the value in the company? It's the people bringing the value of the company, and their talent, their expertise, and their passion. So how do you ensure you encapsulate that, hold on to it, and empower them to do great work? And I think, you know, it's interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I think there's a Welsh production company that's gone employment-owned. I think it's when there was a piece, Broadcast is our trade magazine, when we went in EO, there's a piece in that about it. And it's sort of people, and I think it struck me that there's a time frame here. So we're of a certain age, and we fed into the early days of Channel 4 as 20-year-olds, mid-20s, when Channel 4 started. You've now got the second generation of those independent production companies that are feeding into the media sector, but a lot of them are also getting to a certain age. And I can think of several companies in Bristol where the founders are 65, 70, and looking at how they get out. And I think a number of them some of them will sell out, undoubtedly. Some of them will do a trade sale. Some of them might do a partnership with an investor. And some of them might go in EO because they've surrounded themselves with really great people to do really lovely work.
I mean, my hope is that more of them will start as EO.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you said yourself that, that we never thought of it when we were in our early 20s. We never thought for a moment we were building an empire. We were just keeping going till the end of the month. That was it. And then we took on our first employee, and had we thought about it, yes, we could so easily have gone, be all shared partners from then, but we didn't. And so it took a long time to work it out.
Yeah, and it was interesting. In the 70s and 80s, there's quite a cooperative movement, wasn't there, in all sorts of areas. And for all sorts of reasons, they tend to disappear, partially because everybody's trying to make all the decisions. And EO isn't about that. You've still got a management structure. But I think that little thing that came up at your newspaper piece about millennials wanting to be self-employed, actually, they'd be much stronger if they grouped together as a small startup. Got more traction and actually set themselves up. And I mean, we were effectively employee-owned on day one because there was just the two of us. Yeah. We didn't own a lot, but actually, effectively, that's what it was. And then we bought this bit of land down by the docks, which we eventually put our building on. At that point, we became a limited company because it was quite a bit of money, £300,000, that it had to hold on to. And I think at that point in 1991, had we known about it, there were, 10 or 15 of us probably about that point?
Yeah.
We would have said, actually, if you're going to have to set up this formal structure, let's do it as an EO structure. But we didn't know about it.
Let me ask you to ask some questions of David and Peter. We've got the roving microphones somewhere. Can I have some hands up with some questions? Right here at the front, thank you. Might need to lend you mine. Here's Ollie.
Whilst we wait, I did a little piece. I didn't do a drawing, it's on the wall, but mine was share. Sharing, yeah. Simply because I think when you think about the way the world is, and where do you start? You start locally and you think globally, don't you? So employment ownership is very much about learning how to share. You then take that to a national level, and then you look at that little blue globe that is out in space, and somehow, over the next few years, collectively, internationally, we've got to learn how to share the limited resources that we have. So I think if you can start that on a very small scale and get that into the mindset that actually we only have that little globe, there's not much in it, and it's going to be 9 billion of us whenever it is quite soon. There's a sort of big need to understand what that sharing actually means.
We might come back to that in a minute, I have a feeling. Would you like to ask your question? Who are you, please? Which organisation are you from?
I'm Manoj Patel. I'm from Watson. We're a firm of surveyors in Leeds, but I work here in Birmingham. And good afternoon to you all. My question is, with the complexities of EO and in its early stages, how easy or how hard was it for the wider community at Ardman to embrace EO when it was introduced to them?
I mean, easy is I think is the short answer. It's I think it's obvious, isn't it, when you're here? It is surely a very attractive proposition. We were, when we suggested it, the company was, still is, in a very strong position. Confident, creative, confident, busy. We got on very well with each other. We were a happy crew. So I think, frankly, it was a very simple and attractive offering.
I think also, film production, and particularly what we do, it's a very collaborative team game. And obviously you're selecting people that get on well, they've got great skills and can contribute. So philosophically, the company was a very collaborative company anyway, just in terms of what it does. So probably we were about 80% of the way there in terms of the philosophy and the culture. And what we've done is kind of formalize it and then put in place all the extras which go with it to the benefit of the partners in the company.
I've got any more questions? Oh, right behind you. That's handy. Thank you.
Hello, it's Olivia Bowen from Castlefield, and we're responsible investment specialists. But I had a question. When you mentioned that you've got your committees set up in groups of 30, and there are lots of different work groups coming out of that, I've heard some advice over the last couple of days that employee ownership isn't about running the business differently, and that you still need those management structures and they make the decisions. And so that intrigued me. Are you encouraging employees as part of this process to influence more how the business is run? And is that possibly problematic in some ways, or is it a part of the engagement work that you're trying to do with them?
I'd say it's part of the latter. It's part of the engagement work. We have a debrief after certainly every big production to work out, are there smarter ways of working? Are there things that weren't well, could work better? And in a sense, what these task groups are looking at is there a better way of operating? Are there things that we need to sort out? I mean, I think, in a way, you don't need to be employee-owned to do that. And this is what's so interesting, I think. I mean, here we have our handbook. And actually, although it's got all the sort of stuff about EO, the first part of it is really about values, the mission statement and that kind of stuff, which actually every company should do. But you tend not to spend time thinking about the purpose, and this does make you spend time doing that. So every company should really run, and a lot of them do, these little task forces to try and tackle these problems. And of course, it also means that the partners take ownership of those issues. And they bring out an awful lot of nuance. Just by listening, I mean, the freelance contractor staff versus the permanent staff, it's a very nuanced discussion. You can assume certain things, but actually their concerns aren't necessarily what you assume. So it's really important to listen very carefully to what people are saying.
Mm. And we do try. We have tried for a long time to to engage as widely as possible on the creative side as well, so that every so often we throw the call out for ideas. And I suppose that's the general point: is anyone can have a great idea, right? But the trick is to be there, listening to it often enough.
I think at the back, yes. Lisa was doing her cheerleading impersonation to attract my attention. Yes, thank you.
Hello, Guy Wilson, 2050 in Frome, Somerset. So we have a large associate pool as well, and I was wondering how you incorporated your large associate pool without falling foul of IR35 rules.
A good old IR35.
Yes, I'd have to talk to, it's funny because in fact we're looking at that as well, and it's actually a big thing in the industry, and I'd have to call on Paula Newport here, who is looking closely at that, because it's quite technical. So I'll pass that question into the midst of the audience.
Do we need a microphone to someone who can help us with that? Put your hand up if you would help us with the IR35 question. We're rather fraught with it at the BBC as well.
Okay, so thanks for that, Dave. IR35, we have a group looking at, we're doing an audit at the moment of all of our contractors who are potentially in that situation. And
just explain, I mean, I know only too well what it is, but can you just briefly, if you can, explain what it means and what sort of problems it causes for people?
So I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a finance expert. I'm actually a people and culture person. So if our FD was here, I'm sure he would give you chapter and verse. But IR35 broadly is a bit of legislation aimed at closing the loopholes between self-employed paying lower tax, if you like. So the audit is around which freelancers or which contractors we have at Ardman who really should be on our payroll as opposed to invoicing. And it's that sort of conversation around, are they workers or are they not workers? So it's that.
Thank you.
That's a non-answer, but anyway.
Well, you did your best with it. It's very, very complicated, and often people don't want to be workers, employed, do they? They want to retain their freelance status for all sorts of reasons. I think there's a man over there. It's really difficult to see. There's a man over there with his hand up. There's a microphone on its way. Thank you.
William Franklin of Pet Franklin. Any chance of a film where Wallace sells his business to an EOT?
Good idea. Yes, he could. Yeah, yes.
It's
It'd be
tried.
a creative challenge, wouldn't it?
He's tried a few businesses.
He
And
has.
most of them have
He's
failed.
an entrepreneur, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Done a bit of window cleaning in his time.
Yeah. Yes,
Tell us about you said that you've got 5 or 6 projects in the pipeline. Tell us about some of them.
they're all deadly secret, but the one, but one that isn't, for example, is Chicken Run. Chicken Run 2. That's is looming. So that is we've got a great script. I think we're close to starting on that. We had a problem. We had a practical problem with Chicken Run 2. I have to say that all our chickens were consumed by fire. We had an unfortunate fire in a storage facility, and I'm sorry, everyone, but all the chickens and the molds that went to make them were all destroyed. So we've had to start again with But luckily, in the wonders of animation, they've come back looking younger and better than ever.
Oh, if only, hey? If only that was it. Oh, Deb's got a question.
I'd like to ask Peter, what was the inspiration behind Morph?
Oh well, it was definitely shared. I mean, it was practical. It was practical because we were just graduated, and we had only one gig in the whole world. That was with the BBC program called Vision On, which is a great program for deaf children, and it changed into a thing called Take Heart, with Tony Hart, the wonderful artist, who's a lovely, lovely man. But I think the producer felt he was lovely but rather serious, or a little bit straight. So Morph was created to be a comic foil. That was what it was. And it started out as a lump of plasticine. And God knows, when I look back at the early ones, they're terrible. The stories are awful and everything. But luckily we had the chance to make 100 stories, and so then gradually over that time his character emerged. Yes.
The other thing is, he's very simple. He's pure clay, because we didn't really have the technology to make these sort of characters. These have got very complex metal skeletons in them with lots of ball and socket joints, and we have a little team just making that bit of them. Then they're made out of silicon and latex. They're quite high tech, these models. But Morph was pure clay because it was the simplest thing to do.
And you also didn't have much money, I'm assuming, at that time.
No, we were working for the BBC, for heaven's sake. And children's BBC for that, at that, yes.
In 2012, when it was the London Olympics, my children were set a task at school of creating a model of some sort to reflect the London Olympics. And my daughter made Usain Morph.
Oh, nice.
Very good,
Really
nice
wonderful. I don't think it's squashed at the bottom of a box somewhere, but at the time it was wonderful.
If you look on the Twitter or something, a lot of people have done the angel of the Morph.
Oh, really?
Which is actually really funny.
When Tony Hart died, didn't his daughter invite everybody to bring their own Morph creation?
And there was a flash mob, wasn't there? I think on the South Bank of Morphs.
Was it Trafalgar Square, somewhere like that?
Yeah, the South
Bank, I think.
Yeah, hundreds and hundreds of them. They were wonderful. You see, the impression that you've made on us all, you see. Any more questions, please? We're looking. Yes, right over in the corner. Hand up, stripy arm. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kath from Riverford Organic Farmers, Rising Stars of the Year. I just wondered how you celebrate your achievements as an employee-owned business.
That's a good question, isn't it? It is an excellent question because we do forget, because I think that is so important to do that when you achieve something. It was easier when we were smaller. When we were small, it's easy to get 30 people to rush down to the pub and celebrate wildly. And when you get bigger, it's more and more difficult, and you get things like, why are we celebrating this project and not this project? But this project has no budget for celebration. So thank you for reminding us, because it's terribly important. But we do. We have very good parties at Aardman. Big ones when we finish a film. at the end of a movie, there's a wrap party, and everyone dresses up shockingly and carries. We for early man was set in the Stone Age, and so we had a very enormous party with everyone dressed as cave persons, and that was fine. Yeah, and my job is always the same as the old fool to dance in an embarrassing way, and then I'm always seconded to go and tell the disco he can play for another half an hour. So, come on, Pete, you do it. Go on. You're the boss. You tell him. But now I'm no longer the boss. I don't get that job anymore.
And, Farmageddon, which is released quite recently, there was a wrap party for that, and a lot of people came as aliens. And boy, oh boy, do our model makers go to town. There were some brilliant aliens at that party. Quite extraordinary.
We got any more questions?
Martin.
Sorry. Simon, thank you.
Simon Fowler, I'm chair of the EOA. Chicken Run is a particular favourite in our family because one of your characters is called Fowler and is an RAF mascot. Can you share with just me, don't tell the rest of them, whether Fowler will appear in Chicken Run too?
Well, you can know. Yeah. Don't tell. Yes, I think yes. We've rebuilt him. Yes, he's ready to go. Actually, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Great character.
Any more?
Martine, sorry, can I just...
Another one? You're hogging it a bit.
It's just because I'm a morph addict. I follow Peter because he takes morph around the world and around the country and puts him in different positions. I don't mean that to mean the way it sounded, sorry. I'm just wondering which are your favourite characters, both of you, and why?
Well, I do like Morph really best, I think, because he does, because he's our firstborn. I'm very, very attached to him, and it feels like an alter ego, a bit like Ash, a bit like Philip Pullman, like a demon. I've got a Morph on my shoulder, except he messes up my jacket horribly because and actually he's a pain in the neck as well because I take him on holiday with me and stuff like that. My wife is quite fed up with him, really.
David?
I'm obviously fond of Morph for the same reasons, but I'm a great fan of Fowler just because of that wonderful British eccentricity, RAF, sort of thing, which I don't think we see enough of these days, quite frankly. It was great. So we were working with an American writer at the time, Kerry Kirkpatrick, on the first film, and we had to give him a whole load of banter. In fact, I got in touch with Derek Robinson, who wrote Piece of Cake, and said, look, can you just provide us with a whole load of RAF banter that we can feed into this character? So Kerry got this great screed of nonsense from Derek Robinson.
I've got to say, it wasn't my idea, so I can say it. But when Fowler reveals that he was a mascot, and he says, the RAF doesn't allow chickens behind the controls of a complex aircraft. And I thought, well, damn right, that's such a great moment.
I should also say that my brother is in the RAF, which is why Chicken Run is such a firm family favourite.
You see, here am I trying to keep the conversation about employee ownership, and we've got the chairman and the CEO going, no, talk about more, talk about Fowler. Have we got any more questions? Because we're going to have to end in a moment. Yes.
Right at the back.
There we are. Hands up. Last question. Thank you.
So you talked about a lot about encapsulating people into the company and taking it forward to EO. Because you created the company and the characters and you know all about the technology advances and how you progress for those, how do you encapsulate yourselves within EO?
Could you just repeat? Did you hear that? Could you repeat that last bit, please?
How do you encapsulate yourselves within EO?
How do we congratulate ourselves?
Encapsulate.
Encapsulate. How do we encapsulate EO?
Do you mean personally, David?
Yes, themselves, yes.
Yeah. I mean, very, very simply, as a project, I love everything about it. I love everything about it, really. I have no misgivings at all. Like it feels lovely. It's had, I won't say it's had a transformative effect, or a slightly transformative effect, but already you can see the changes in the people. That extra bit of engagement, and extra excitement that it brings. So I love that, and then I love to feel, personally, I love to feel part of that. You know, it's funny, and I love the fact that for years and years and years I had one partner, and now I've got 300 or whatever it is now, and that's I love that.
I think the other thing that's come out of it is the dedication and the love and the commitment from the partners. This comes in a way through the rep group and the people they're working with. The work that they've done, they've thrown themselves into it. We've got some brilliant reps dealing with quite complex issues, and they're not afraid to tackle those, and they're just throwing so much energy behind it. That's been really inspiring. That's the whole point of it, isn't it? You get that sort of energy and commitment and drive and new thinking. There's one particular partner who's a brilliant model maker, and he threw up a whole bundle of quite tricky questions. And I thought, good on you. You've got to ask these questions. You've got to be bold enough to stand up and say, what about this, that, and the other? And I thought, really, really good. I think it's great. He's got the balls as a freelancer as well as he was. We could have said, look, sort of, you're just being a pain in the arse. But actually, he wasn't. He was incredibly committed to the company as a contract sculptor, and asked some really difficult questions which we had to answer. And I thought that was a really good, strong, bold move.
Yeah, one of the words I spotted on the wall was disruptive.
Yes.
It really can help, can't it?
Yeah.
I know you weren't really looking forward to this, but you there was nothing to worry about in the end, was there? You were amongst such friends, and there is such a fondness for you and all of these extraordinary characters that you've created. Thank you so much for ending the conference for us. Peter Law, David Sproxton, thank you very much.
Thank you.